Good afternoon to everybody out on Facebook land, coming to you from Foodlink's Facebook page here in September during Hunger Action Month. This is going to be the first in a series of videos that we are doing to talk about some of the connections between the work that Foodlink does and the work that other folks in the city and in the community do around the root cause issues of hunger. This month, we are really trying to lift up the work that we've done in the last year or so to develop an advocacy agenda that both focuses on how people are getting food today and focuses on how we can get at the root causes of hunger so that people don't need to rely chronically on the services that we offer and on the services that the agencies that we work with offer. So today we're going to be talking with Barbara Rivera from the Citywide Tenant Union and Mark Muoio from the Legal Aid Society of Rochester about some of the work that they do and some of the connections that they see between hunger and eviction and housing, and what some of the policy solutions or what some of the kind of direct actions that people can take right now to impact around those issues. So I will let them both do a introduction of themselves, and then you're both welcome to kind of take the floor and talk a little about the work that you do and how you see the work that you do connecting to some of the work that Foodlink does and the issues that we work on.
Hi, so my name is Barbara Rivera. I'm a lead tenant organizer for the Citywide Tenant Union, and I see a connection with housing and food because with one, you have the other, obviously, you know. I know during COVID, a lot of families have lost their jobs. They were afraid of like how they were going to pay their rent, how they were going to provide food for their kids, now that, you know, schools are shut down and all that. So it's important to think about because, you know, some families are struggling to pay rent already. Some families are already struggling to put food in their homes. So it's important to like be aware of what's going on like that, and the communities that are providing programs to help people get connected to like Foodlink and all that stuff, you know, like you guys do great at making sure that families are taken care of. Citywide, we're always committed to like trying to support the tenants and in their needs. So I know a lot of people are worried about being evicted, and there's a lot of questions around the moratorium. I know there's a lot of like things in there that a lot of people don't understand. Even I am still a little confused about what's going on. Yeah. So, you know, this is a tough time, and, you know, as a community, we all have to pull together. And I know when I've done, reached out to tenants and stuff, they've always asked, like, do you know anybody where I can get some food from? Like, I have a sister or a cousin or something, like, she's kind of struggling for food in her house. So it's always like, well, I know someone that's connected to something, like, you know, so it's like this, what is it, like a web of connections that we all have in the community. Yeah. So, yeah, it's so important.
And so I'm the program director of the Housing and Consumer Law Unit at the Legal Aid Society of Rochester. I've been working there for almost 11 years. One of the main programs that we have, and that is probably my favorite, is eviction prevention, what we call the Tenant Advocacy program, where we represent tenants in Rochester City Court. And so we're there on a regular basis, and there's a new program that has been implemented with City of Rochester funds and county funds to hopefully, and we're doing our very, very best for this, to represent any tenant who's looking for assistance, who's looking for representation in an eviction in city court. So I think that's a huge step forward in our community. I mean, given the disaster that we've hopefully gone through, and I just mean I hope that it's over. Yeah. But I think it's a big step forward, and hopefully we can make it go on after the pandemic is over. So the connection that I see from my representation of, you know, thousands of people in city court comes from the conditions of housing. So if there are rats or mice or bugs that are getting in your food, you've just used your labor or used the funds that you have to buy food that's no longer edible. If you have electricity that is unreliable, If your sockets go out or your refrigerator doesn't work because either, it's something that you've transported numerous times or it belongs to your landlord and is just in the property. If the freezer stops working, you lose all your food. If your refrigerator isn't working, the food goes bad. So those are the spots where I think someone who works in city court will hear about those types of things you might not think about. If you get evicted, you're going to lose almost all your stuff in some cases. People sometimes come home with all their things on the side of the road, and I think they probably just throw all the food out. So that's where that stuff comes from. I've heard people spend, I just went to the store, and sometimes transportation is an issue. So maybe you got a ride, maybe you borrowed a friend's car and you're able to spend a couple $100s at the store, and then some catastrophe happens, and you lose all that. And, now it's hard for you to get transportation, and that $200 is down the drain. So I run into that a whole lot in terms of conditions of property and how that affects people's daily lives, including food security.
Yeah, a phrase that we hear often and we say often here is that just the rent eats first at the beginning of the month, right? And that is a kind of unmovable bill in people's lives. And one of the reasons that we see, folks who need to access places like pantries and hot meal programs is because the bulk of the income that they make is going to the cost of their housing and often to the cost of substandard housing. Barbara, I wonder if that's something that you hear from the members of the Citywide Tenants Union, if you've got experiences or stories that you could share from people who end up at food pantries because of the condition of their housing or the cost of their rent.
Yeah, like just the buildings that we've visited already, like we've had people, I've walked into an apartment actually, I think a few months ago, where like the conditions were so bad, they didn't have electricity. And as soon as you walk in, you can see like it's the middle of winter, it's freezing. There's nothing in the fridge, and they haven't eaten in probably 2 days. Like they're like, where I can get some food. Like we call our, like St. Joe's and like House of Mercy, a Foodlink. Like we call people and we're like, hey, what can we do to get them at least like some type of food that they can like try to eat some warm food. We could try to cook them something at the food kitchen. Like, we always like run into things like that. Like I walked into an apartment over on East Main Street, and the infestation there was so bad. Like you said, Mark, like the rats like ate up through all of it. There's feces everywhere. Like no one can eat food out of that. Like there's no way. Like even cooking, like I had a tenant say cooking, they had a mouse come out onto the counter while they were cooking. Like that just ruined their appetite because now they're like worried that the mice are gonna be trying to get into the stove. Like this is like a real thing. Like things like this happen. Roaches get into your food. Like I opened a fridge once and there was like roaches inside the refrigerator. Like it's bad. Like I had a mother. She had such a bad infestation that she was like afraid to even cook in her kitchen because as soon as she walks into the kitchen, there's roaches everywhere. She like had to like literally buy food from the corner store, and we all know that's not a healthy thing. Like children and people in general just need their fresh fruits and vegetables to eat, and they need like things like that to sustain their bodies. And eating like fried chicken from the corner store every day or a sub isn't, healthy. So.
And, if you do have an infestation, a lot of times the stove is where it comes from because you have to run a line into the basement. And if it's not properly sealed, then that's just an access point near food or near the smell of food for rodents to access that area, and then they're in and around a stove where sometimes food falls and things like that. So that's just one piece that I thought of when Barbara was talking about that.
Yeah, and the numbers for food insecurity in our area have certainly shot up during the pandemic, but even as recently as last year, where at least like 40% of people are food insecure, and at least 40% of people are also rent burdened, paying more than 30% of their income in housing. And a point that we try to make a lot is like these are the same groups of people who are facing these issues. And I wonder if you could talk about if there's any kind of recourse for tenants who are facing those kinds of conditions, or for people who are rent burdened and living in substandard conditions, to be able to improve the conditions of their housing.
Yeah, so recently, the Legal Aid Society led a group, and we were the lead attorneys to bring an action in city court to have, pretty bad violations fixed on a house. Now, I'm not going to say that we were fully successful because the landlord still has not fixed those things, but we did get an order from the judge that came out right before the pandemic hit, ordering the landlord to fix the property. So that was a landmark in itself, that had never happened before outside of New York City that we had ever been able to find. So that was a huge policy victory. I'm not going to say on the ground that it was a massive victory at this point, but the idea that can happen is a really big deal, that a tenant can sue their landlord actively rather than be on the defensive at court and say, I might owe you, I didn't pay you 2 months of rent. Let's not say that they owe it. I might not have paid 2 months of rent, but I didn't pay it because rats and roaches are eating my food. I don't have a light in my bathroom. Water's coming down every time the upstairs neighbor flushes the toilet. Okay. Those stories are all the time. And so it's real and everybody understands that. So a lot of times you're on the defensive, and that is one way to bring your case to court. You might not have all the factors that fit the way to bring a proactive case, to bring it yourself. But if you can bring it and be defensive, you can have photographs, you can have an inspection report from the city of Rochester. Other folks who have, who've seen the property can give testimony, things like that. That's how I tell people to go about doing that. And before that, you want to make sure the landlord knows about it. That's the first question the judge asks. Have you informed your landlord about the problems in your property? Of course, if there's a city inspection, that gets sent to the landlord, but you also want to send a letter and hopefully make it certified mail to make sure that it's received, of what you're asking to be fixed. And if it doesn't get fixed, then you can say you're not going to pay your rent. That does create risk. I need to say that. But those are the steps that I would advise people to take.
Yeah, same. We're always telling, tenants to make sure that you get in contact with code enforcement and call your landlord and document, take pictures and show your landlord, look, this is what I'm dealing with, in order, just that they're aware too, so that they're not saying that they never knew that this was going on,
Yeah. Absolutely. Barbara, could you talk for a minute just about the model of the tenant union for, things that tenants do to kind of help each other work together to improve their housing conditions?
Yeah, so when tenants live in buildings, we encourage them to do tenant associations in their apartment and in their buildings. So with that helps them, push things more forward. There's power in numbers. I always tell tenants that. So if you are going through something in your unit, 9 times out of 10, there's probably other neighbors that are probably going through the same thing and haven't spoken about it. So it's good to go and knock on your neighbors' doors and just kind of get to know each other. It's nice to have someone take that leadership role and just kind of try to get them organized themselves. I always encourage at least 2 tenants to try to do that. Sometimes when there's a tenant that's just in a house by themselves, we try to advocate and we try to support them by searching for other tenants with the same landlord to see if they're also going through an issue, and then we try to help them form something together too. So tenant associations are super important. Because I'm, with my building, I'm living in Thurston, and that's what we did. We organized the tenant association, and for people that don't know that story, we went on a rest strike and pushed for a lot of our issues to be fixed and taken care of. So that's how we did it.
Great. As we kind of get to a closeout here, I'm wondering if both of you could share anything that you've got your eyes on from either a policy or advocacy perspective, kind of state, local, federal, things that are coming down the pipe, and maybe ways that either people who are watching this video or organizations like Foodlink could be in a supporting role on some of those things to help people in their housing and to help prevent evictions right now?
Yeah, so right now we are advocating for so the housing voucher, which is to house the homeless. It gives the money to like at least get them into an apartment, the resources that they need to get there. We're pushing to extend the moratorium. We're working on getting something put out that explains enough to like get people to understand what that means. And we're still trying to cancel rent. We're still pushing for it. And TOPA, the tenant's opportunity to purchase, which I think is super important because that keeps people who've been living in their homes for 30-something years, like that gives them that chance to like buy their homes and, you know, in case the landlord can't, you know, handle the finances or anything like that, gets foreclosed or something. So we're doing that, and we're always looking for people to join us and volunteer, and we're out there working and helping our tenants. Pretty much what we're doing right now.
To answer your question, I would say that a lot of things I've been pushing for have just been implemented. So universal access to council in the city of Rochester is something we've been working on for years and just got passed. We have DHS and other, right now it's Community Place and Catholic Family Center, who are sitting next to our court. And we have a single dedicated court, not a single dedicated judge, but a single dedicated court with a clerk to try and get our cases resolved and to make sure that it doesn't become a mill, okay? Let's say that everyone's treated individually and that all the cases are given due consideration. And so I'm trying to make those things work. If I'm gonna connect it to food, I mean, I know that there are what I think are probably onerous restrictions on how people can use their food stamps that make life difficult for people. I don't know if that's connected to housing, but I think that'd be something to push for if there's a new administration at the federal level. And then we can always push DHS to think about their regulations in a broader way. We were told for years that they can't come to court, they don't have enough people, and lo and behold, they're there. So whether it's about relaxing, oh, I can't think of the name, when you lose your benefits because they say you did something wrong at DHS. What is that called?
Oh, sanctions?
Yes. So to make sanctions more closely related to the way that they're implemented in New York City would help a lot of people here in Rochester. And that was put forward, but it wasn't completed. And I think that we can just keep pushing for things like that.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for being here and for the work that you're doing and for the information that you're offering for people. Again, Mark Muoio from the Legal Aid Society of Rochester, Barbara Rivera from the Citywide Tenant Union. We'll include information about both your organizations on here for people to be able to look more into the work that you're doing and to get involved with some of that work as well. And yeah, we appreciate everything that you're doing for folks in the city.
Thanks, Tom.